Vicious dog attack on child. Young girl mauled by dog in Perth North suffers serious facial injuries. A young girl has been left with serious facial injuries after being attacked by a dog in the northern suburbs of Perth, Western Australia. The frightening incident has sparked an investigation by local authorities and raised renowned concerns about dog attacks involving children. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a terrifying localized incident in Western Australia that, really exposes a daily risk hidden in almost every suburban neighborhood.
It does. It's that volatile intersection of kids, public spaces, and animal behavior.
Exactly. We have a stack of recent incident reports detailing a severe dog attack on a young girl. But we aren't just here to recount a tragedy today.
No, not at all.
We are using the facts of this specific event to investigate a nationwide issue. So, if you live in a neighborhood, if you have children, or, if you simply walk down a residential street, the data we're about to explore directly applies to your environment. Okay, let's unpack this.
That local event serves as a stark focal point for us today. By analyzing the specific data points of what transpired, we start to uncover behavioral and, regulatory patterns that affect communities everywhere.
Right.
This isn't just about one dog in one suburb. It is a critical look at the fundamental mechanics of how humans, particularly vulnerable children and domesticated animals, coexist.
And where that coexistence catastrophically fails.
Precisely.
So let's establish the facts of the event first. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon in Hillary's, Western Australia. A primary school-age girl was playing outside when she was suddenly mauled by a neighbor's dog. Now, Hillary's is a residential suburb within the city of Joondalup.
That's in northern Perth.
Right, up in northern Perth. The attack occurred around 3:40 p.m. Authorities confirmed the victim is under 10 years old, and she was simply outside her family home with a group of friends.
Just a completely normal afternoon.
Yeah, totally normal, until the neighbor's animal approached and initiated the attack.
The timeline detailed in the reports is what stands out most from an analytical perspective here. We often assume suburban streets have this built-in safety net.
Sure. You have daylight, you're close to home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Proximity to home, a group setting, regular neighborhood routines. Yet the sequence of events shows how rapidly that assumed safety degrades.
It just vanishes.
Within a matter of seconds, an entirely routine afternoon fractured into a severe medical emergency.
And the emergency response really reflects the sheer severity of that fracture. St. John WA ambulance paramedics were immediately dispatched to the scene.
Right.
Upon arriving and assessing the child, they made the call to transport her to Perth Children's Hospital under the highest priority.
Which is a very specific operational designation.
Yeah, let's dig into that. How does a highest priority dispatch alter the standard medical response in a situation like this?
Well, it essentially bypasses standard protocols to get the patient directly to specialized pediatric trauma care.
Okay.
When paramedics use that designation, it clears the way for the fastest possible transit. They recognized immediately that the physical damage from the mauling required acute surgical or trauma intervention tailored specifically to a child's physiology.
Because a standard emergency room wouldn't be enough.
A standard generalized ER just might not be equipped to manage that specific type of pediatric trauma as seamlessly.
Wow. And the reports later confirmed the extent of that damage, noting that the young girl suffered serious facial injuries.
It's a grim detail.
It is grim, yeah. But it's central to understanding the mechanics of these attacks, which we will get into shortly.
Yes, we definitely need to cover that.
Thankfully, medical authorities clarified that while severe, the injuries were not life-threatening. A hospital spokesperson confirmed she remains in stable condition.
That is the one piece of good news in all this.
Absolutely. But looking at the operational logs from the scene, there's this really interesting detail regarding the WA police.
Ah, yes, the police response.
Yeah, they were called to the residential address initially, but officers later confirmed their presence was no longer required and they cleared out. Why would law enforcement leave the scene of a severe violent mauling almost immediately?
It looks counterintuitive from the outside, doesn't it? But it is actually a marker of highly efficient crisis management.
Really?
Yeah, and interagency communication. When police arrived, they assessed the immediate threat level. The paramedics already had the victim stabilized and prepped for transport.
So the immediate danger to human life was already being actively managed.
Exactly. Furthermore, the local municipal authorities were already mobilizing to handle the animal control aspect of the incident.
I
So the police determined their presence was redundant. They stepped back to allow the specialized medical and local ranger teams to execute their respective duties without crowding what is already a chaotic scene.
That makes a lot of sense. But it shifts the burden directly onto the local government authorities. Once that ambulance drove away, the city had an entirely different crisis to manage.
The animal itself.
Right. The animal responsible for the attack was still in the neighborhood. Local rangers from the city of Joondalup stepped in immediately and impounded the dog.
This is the critical pivot from emergency triage to civic regulation.
Oh.
Impounding the animal is the immediate regulatory reflex required to neutralize the ongoing public safety risk.
Right. Get the danger off the street.
But simultaneously, it secures the primary factor in the investigation that must follow. The municipal government essentially takes ownership of the environmental hazard.
And the local government stance was highly visible here. Joondalup Mayor Daniel Kingston issued a public statement addressing the attack.
He did.
I actually want to read his exact words to ground our discussion of the municipal response. He stated, quote, "The city takes all dog attack reports seriously and is investigating the incident as a matter of priority. The city has impounded the dog to remove the risk to local residents and the wider community," end quote.
If we connect that statement to the bigger picture, the mayor is initiating a dual-purpose investigation.
Okay, break that down for us.
The first objective is public reassurance. He's confirming the physical threat has been extracted from the suburb.
The dog is gone, people are safe.
Exactly. The second, more complex objective is reconstructing the mechanics of the failure.
Right, figuring out what went wrong.
The investigating officers have to determine exactly how the animal gained access to the street in the first place, and whether the dog's owner breached any local containment regulations.
Which explains why the city of Joondalup issued an urgent public plea alongside that statement.
Yes, the call for witnesses.
Right. They asked anyone who witnessed the attack or who possessed information about the circumstances leading up to it to contact the council's field officers.
They're essentially crowdsourcing the neighborhood's eyes and ears.
Just trying to piece together the moments right before 3:40 p.m.
Because field officers have to build an airtight factual timeline. The legal and civic responsibilities of pet ownership hinge entirely on those details.
Like, was a gate left unlatched?
Was the dog being walked off leash in a restricted zone? The investigation moves the focus from the emotional shock of the victim's injuries
to the structural and human failures that allowed the dog to reach the child in the first place.
Exactly.
And, the structural failures are where this isolated tragedy opens up into a massive national issue. The data we pulled for this deep dive provides a really sobering context.
It does. The numbers are staggering.
The Hillary's incident is not an outlier at all. Across Australia, there are around 100,000 dog bite incidents recorded every single year.
100,000 incidents annually equates to hundreds of bites every single day.
Wow.
That statistic completely reframes how we must view suburban safety. We are not talking about rare, anomalous events.
Yeah.
We are looking at a systemic, daily reality playing out in shared residential spaces across the country.
So for anyone listening, whether you are a parent supervising a play date in the front yard or just a neighbor walking your own dog down the sidewalk, this data proves you are navigating an environment with a built-in statistical risk.
It's just a mathematical reality of shared spaces.
Right. But with 100,000 incidents happening annually, who is bearing the brunt of this risk? Does the data point to a specific vulnerability?
The data is unequivocal on this. The demographic experiencing the highest rate of injuries in these 100,000 annual incidents is children aged 0 to 9.
0 to 9.
Yes. Which aligns exactly with the demographic of the young girl in the Hillary's incident.
That is a highly specific concentration of risk. What is the behavioral science driving that statistic? Why are children under 10 disproportionately affected in these encounters?
The source material highlights 3 intersecting factors that explain this vulnerability. We're looking at geometry, movement, and communication.
Okay, let's start with geometry. The physical reality of the child.
Right. Because children under 10 are significantly shorter in stature, they exist right at eye level with most medium to large breeds of dogs.
And because they are at eye level, the physical dynamic of an attack completely changes.
Completely.
For an adult, a sudden aggressive lunge might result in a bite to the hand, maybe the thigh or the ankle.
Mm-hmm.
But for a child, that exact same lunge targets the most vulnerable areas of the body.
The geometry of the interaction dictates the severity of the trauma. Any aggressive action from the dog is statistically highly likely to result in severe facial or neck trauma for a child in that age bracket.
Which perfectly contextualizes the paramedic reports from Hillary's. They specifically noted the serious facial injuries the young girl sustained.
She was physically in the most dangerous possible alignment with the animal.
Okay, so that's geometry. The second factor the reports detail is the unpredictability of a child's movements.
This is a huge one.
When we picture the scene at Hillary's, kids playing outside after school, we picture running, jumping, sudden changes in direction, high-pitched noise.
Just normal kid stuff.
Exactly, entirely normal human play behaviors. But how does an animal process that environment?
Well, from a canine behavioral perspective, erratic, high-energy movement is a massive environmental trigger.
Really?
Yes. A dog's nervous system is heavily wired to respond to sudden shifts in motion, while a human adult recognizes a game of tag on the sidewalk as harmless play.
A dog might interpret it completely differently.
A dog may interpret those sudden, unpredictable movements as something that triggers its natural predatory or defensive reactive instincts. A child at play generates a constant stream of sudden stimuli that can rapidly overload a dog's threshold for tolerance.
It just highlights a fundamental biological mismatch. The children are not attempting to provoke the animal. They're simply existing as children.
But the animal is interpreting that normal childhood behavior through a rigid instinctual lens.
Which leads directly into the third vulnerability factor you mentioned, a child's limited ability to recognize warning signs.
Yes.
If a dog's tolerance is being overloaded by those erratic movements, it is presumably signaling its distress before it bites, right?
Dogs are incredibly communicative animals, but they utilize a nonverbal vocabulary.
Okay.
They communicate stress and boundary enforcement through subtle shifts in body language. Things like the tension in their facial muscles, the carriage of their tail, the pinning of their ears, or exposing the whites of their eyes.
And the critical vulnerability here is that a child under 10 lacks the cognitive development to translate those nonverbal cues. They just don't have the life experience.
The child is operating in a complete communicative blind spot.
So they might interpret a dog baring its teeth as a human smile.
Exactly. Or mistake a dog's rigid defensive posture as the animal standing still to be hugged.
Oh man, that is terrifying.
The child cannot read the dashboard warning lights the animal is flashing. When you combine those three elements, the high-risk physical alignment of being at eye level, the instinct-triggering erratic movements of childhood play, and the total inability to read canine warning signs, you have a mathematically dangerous equation.
It really removes the notion of malice from the animal, doesn't it?
It does. It places the reality of these 100,000 annual incidents squarely in the realm of biological and communicative mismatch.
Well, if the biology is fundamentally mismatched, the solution has to rely entirely on environmental management.
That's the only way forward.
The authorities investigating the Hillary's incident and addressing the national statistics aren't just cataloging the injuries. They're actively pushing a framework for prevention.
And they break this down into three core pillars for dog owners: proper supervision, training, and secure containment.
Let's examine those. Those three pillars really represent a necessary shift from passive pet ownership to active management, don't they?
Yes. Passive ownership relies on the optimistic assumption that an animal will automatically conform to human social norms.
Which we just established they don't.
Right. Active management acknowledges the biological reality of the animal, instincts and all, and puts physical and behavioral barriers in place to prevent those instincts from resulting in injury.
So let's look at that first pillar, proper supervision. The guidelines emphasize the word proper, which implies that merely being in the same general vicinity as the dog isn't sufficient when children are present in a shared public space.
Proper supervision requires active engagement and proximity. It means the adult has the physical capability and the situational awareness to intervene before an interaction escalates.
Because, as the timeline in Hillary's vividly demonstrated, an attack happens in a matter of seconds.
Passive observation from a front porch or looking down at a phone while a dog wanders near playing children is entirely useless in preventing an incident with that kind of velocity. It's just not enough. Now, the second pillar is training. While it seems like an obvious requirement for pet ownership, the reports frame training specifically around establishing predictable behavior in highly unpredictable suburban environments.
Training builds impulse control within the animal. It provides the owner with a behavioral mechanism, like a strong recall command, to break the dog's focus when it encounters the erratic stimuli of children playing.
Right.
However, behavioral experts emphasize that training is never an infallible failsafe. Even highly trained dogs can experience instinctual drift under the right environmental pressures.
Which is exactly why the third pillar is the most critical element of public safety.
Yes.
Secure containment.
Secure containment is the absolute bedrock of municipal safety. It is the physical barrier that prevents the biological mismatch we discussed earlier from ever occurring in a shared neighborhood space.
We're talking fences.
Fences of adequate height, gates with secure latching mechanisms, and regular maintenance checks to ensure there are no vulnerabilities in the perimeter. It really frames containment not just as a way to keep your dog from running away, but as your primary civic duty to your neighbors.
Absolutely.
When you consider the 100,000 bites happening annually across the country, a massive portion of those are the direct result of containment failures.
The side gate left open for 5 minutes while carrying groceries.
Or the fence panel that weakened over the winter. If active supervision lapses, and if behavioral training fails in the face of instinct, the physical barrier of secure containment is the last line of defense preventing a child from being injured.
The physical environment must be managed because the animal's instincts cannot be reasoned with.
Wow.
The burden of safety always falls on the adult managing the environment, never on the child playing within it, and rarely on the animal acting out its biology.
It is a sobering realization regarding how we structure our communities.
It really is.
We started this deep dive looking at a specific Wednesday afternoon in Hillary's. A young girl rushed to Perth Children's Hospital, a neighborhood fractured by a sudden mauling, and a local government scrambling to investigate the regulatory failures. But by peeling back the layers of that localized incident, we uncovered a nationwide reality of 100,000 annual dog bites. We explored the behavioral science showing how the sheer geometry of being a child, combined with their natural energy and their inability to read canine body language, makes them uniquely vulnerable in shared spaces.
It forces us to look at the sidewalks and cul-de-sacs outside our front doors differently. We rely heavily on the social contract of a neighborhood to keep us safe.
Right.
But we have to remember that domesticated animals operate outside of that human construct. They rely on us to manage the boundaries on their behalf.
It certainly changes the perspective on what it means to be a responsible neighbor.
It does. And it raises an important question to think about as you navigate your own community. We've established today that young children lack the cognitive development to recognize an animal's nonverbal warning signs. But how proficient are we as adults?
That's a great point.
Are we too quick to project complex human emotions onto our neighborhood pets, completely missing the subtle, instinctual warning signs they are giving us right before an incident occurs?
That is a phenomenal question to end on, and a reminder that situational awareness applies to all of us. A huge thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive. Understanding the behavioral mechanics and the civic responsibilities behind these incidents is the best tool we have for making those everyday residential spaces safer for everyone. Keep looking closely at the world around you and always stay curious. We will catch you on the next deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. After a serious dog attack that left a child with major facial injuries in Perth, what steps should authorities and communities take to reduce the rising number of dog bite incidents involving young children? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.